My stepbrother got $85,000 of my college fund for Broadway dreams. 10 years later, he was broke, and when my parents begged for him, I shut the door. I am a 33-year-old female family medicine physician who has my own practice in Portland. But 10 years ago, I was a 17-year-old who had just been cheated out of her entire future by parents who believed musical theater was more important than medical school. Here's how things went down. My mother, Marianne, married my stepfather, Roland, when I was 13. He arrived with his 16-year-old son, Adrian, who quickly became the golden child of our household. Adrian was a wannabe Broadway star who spent his waking hours singing show tunes and practicing jazz hands in the mirror. I must admit that the kid has decent pipes. However, he possessed the work ethic of a sloth and the ego of Kanye West. Roland was one of those divorced dads who tried too hard to be the cool parent. He was constantly bragging about Adrian's artistic abilities and how he was going to be the next big thing on Broadway. Every topic eventually came back to Adrian's most recent audition or performance. Meanwhile, I was getting straight A's in AP chemistry and biology, volunteering at the hospital, and plotting my path to medical school. The bias was so evident that it was nearly laughable. Roland's reaction to my acceptance into the National Honor Society was, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Adrian got the lead in the school musical?" When I scored in the 95th percentile on my PATs, Marianne clapped politely and then immediately shifted the conversation to how Adrian needed new headshots for his portfolio. Adrian milked the spotlight for all it was worth. This child would break into song during dinner chats. Not kidding. We'd be talking about grocery lists when he'd suddenly start singing Defying Gravity from Wicked like we were his personal audience. Roland would beam with pride as I sat there, wondering if this was how a stroke felt. The real stinger was how they handled our various activities. My science fair projects received, "Very nice, dear." Adrian's community theater performances were attended by the entire family, with flowers and a celebratory luncheon following. I once won first place in the regional scientific Olympiad, and Roland's only comment was that we could leave early because Adrian had rehearsal. I recall one particular incident during my junior year that completely captured the familial dynamics. I'd been working on an antibiotic resistance study in local water sources for months. I spent weekends at the university lab, conducted fieldwork to collect materials, and presented discoveries that impressed my AP biology teacher sufficiently to recommend me for a state-level science competition. Adrian auditioned for the lead in the community theater's performance of Guys and Dolls. The same week I learned I had won second place at state, a major accomplishment that would look well on college applications. He received a callback. Not the part, but a callback. Guess which accomplishment dominated family dinner discussions for the next month? Roland actually printed the callback notice and placed it on the refrigerator. My state-level science medal went into a drawer someplace, but I assumed college would be my escape. I'd been saving every penny from my part-time job at the drugstore, 3 shifts each week after school and 8-hour weekend stints. The labor was quite tedious, stocking shelves, running the register, and assisting customers who couldn't understand why their insurance wouldn't pay their pet's medication. But each paycheck went directly into my college savings account. More importantly, Marianne had always assured me that my college fund would cover the rest. This was not some hazy parental commitment. This was a real account begun by my biological father, Martin Reinhardt, who died in a vehicle accident when I was 8. Martin had been a sensible and forward-thinking engineer who established an education fund that increased steadily over time through careful investments. By my senior year, it had risen to almost $85,000. Perhaps not enough for Harvard Medical School, but more than enough to get me through undergraduate school debt-free and provide a solid platform for medical school applications. My entire path was planned. 4 years of pre-med at Oregon State, maintaining a good GPA, performing well on the MCATs, being accepted to Oregon Health and Science University, completing residency, and eventually becoming Dr. Clara Reinhardt. That is where I messed up. I assumed that having my deceased father's money set aside exclusively for my schooling meant it was mine. The bomb dropped in the spring of my senior year, right in the midst of college decision season. I was investigating medical schools, comparing pre-med programs, and preparing to accept my seat at Oregon State. I'd been admitted to numerous institutions, but Oregon State provided the finest balance of academic reputation and in-state tuition. Marianne knocked on my door with that fake charming voice she employed when she was going to deliver bad news. She used the same tone when she told me we couldn't afford the senior class trip to Washington, D.C., or that I couldn't acquire a car for my 16th birthday due to financial constraints. "Honey, we need to talk about college." I imagined she wanted to talk about lunch plans or dorm room assignments. Consider asking about my class schedule or campus orientation. Boy, was I mistaken. "Your stepfather and I have been talking, and we've decided to redirect your college fund toward Adrian's career development." I looked at her as if she had started speaking ancient Greek. The terms literally did not compute. What do you mean redirect? Well, Adrian got accepted to that intensive summer program at Juilliard. And then there's the year-long acting conservatory in New York. This is his shot, Clara. His one opportunity to really make it in the industry. The words hit me like a physical punch in the stomach. I felt nauseated. That's my college fund. Martin Reinhardt left that money for my education. Marianne's face tightened and became protective, the expression she often used when she knew she was being unfair, but was determined to maintain her stance. Roland is your father now, and we make decisions as a family. Adrian's dreams are just as valid as yours. Adrian's dreams. I'm planning to become a doctor. I am going to save lives. He wants to dance about in tights, singing show tunes. Don't be so dramatic. There will be other opportunities for you to go to college. Adrian's window is closing. He needs to strike while the iron is hot. Strike while the iron is hot. This was about a 20-year-old who had never worked a real job, never paid for anything himself, and whose crowning achievement was being cast as chorus member number 3 in the high school production of Oklahoma. You can take out student loans like everyone else, Roland said from the doorway, where he'd clearly been listening. Character building experience. Adrian's artistic development can't wait. Character building, right? Because working 3 jobs to pay for medical school while Adrian lived in Manhattan pursuing his art was exactly what Martin Reinhardt intended when he established that college fund. I used every reason I could think of. The money came from my father, not Roland. I had real professional opportunities with definite earning potential, whereas Adrian was following a pipe dream in an industry where 90% of actors are unemployed at any given time. Medical school was costly and competitive. I needed that financial basis to have a serious chance at success. Nothing worked. Roland had persuaded Marianne that Adrian was the family's best investment. Their ticket to fame and prosperity. One successful Broadway show and he'll be set for life, he said again. Meanwhile, doctors are a dime a dozen. Doctors are available in abundance. This comes from a guy who had a Jiffy Lube franchise and thought changing your oil every 3,000 miles was the pinnacle of automotive sophistication. The conversation went in circles for 2 hours. Roland kept mentioning return on investment and promoting artistic potential. Marianne insisted that this was what families did for one another, and that I was selfish for not understanding Adrian's needs. I kept emphasizing that this was actually theft, taking money intended for one person's education and giving it to someone else totally. Roland finally dropped the true bomb. The decision's already been made. We've spoken to the financial advisor and begun the transfer process. Adrian's program starts in June, so we needed to act quickly. They hadn't contacted me, asked for my views, and had already begun moving my money to pay Adrian's fantasy before even informing me of it. The worst part was seeing Adrian's reaction after they told him. The kid did not even have the decency to feel guilty. He's just started looking at New York residences and discussing how he'll thank the family in his Tony Award acceptance speech. Don't worry, Clara, he replied with a patronizing smile that made me want to throw something at him. When I make it big, I'll help pay for your medical school. Think of this as an investment in both our futures. An investment in my Broadway dreams. Using my deceased father's money. I locked myself in my room for the remainder of the day, alternately angry and depressed. Everything I'd worked for, every strategy I'd devised, and every sacrifice I'd made hinged on that college money. Without it, medical school became immensely more difficult, if not impossible. That summer was harsh in ways I had not anticipated. While Adrian was having a great time at Juilliard, sharing Instagram stories from trendy Manhattan cafes and networking events, I was working extra shifts at the drugstore and applying for every scholarship, grant and loan I could find. The financial assistance office at Oregon State became my second home. Mrs. Schneider, my guidance counselor, guided me through the maze of applications and procedures. She was aware of my circumstances and was silently outraged, despite her attempts to remain professional. There are options, she explained during one of our discussions. Scholarship applications, loan paperwork, and explanations of work-study programs were all spread out on her desk. Scholarships for merit, need-based help, work-study programs, and student loans. It won't be easy, but it's doable. What she didn't say, but we both understood, was that it would be a lot more difficult than it should be. Students with familial support can concentrate on academics and extracurricular activities. Students like me would have to work 30 hours a week just to survive. I ended up putting together a financial aid package that covered approximately 60% of my expenses. Academic scholarships funded a portion of the cost. Need-based assistance assisted with lodging and board, but there remained a large deficit. The rest came from working nights at a 24-hour diner near school called the Sunrise Cafe, where I served coffee and pie to inebriated college students and shift workers beginning at 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3 evenings a week. My freshman year schedule looked like it was devised by a sadist. Classes throughout the day, study time in the afternoon, and job starting at 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., sleep for 4 hours, and repeat. I survived on vending machine coffee and whatever free food I could find at the cafe. Day-old muffins, soup about to be thrown out, and the occasional sandwich from a compassionate cook. Meanwhile, Adrian shared Instagram stories from trendy Manhattan cafes, discussing his artistic path and networking with other budding performers. The $85,000 that should have paid for my school went for his coffee shop meetings, acting classes, and what appeared to be a rather active social life. My grades suffered during the first year. Not bad. I maintained a 3.4 GPA, but not the 3.8 I had hoped for. It's difficult to perform academically when you only get 4 hours of sleep and your biggest meal of the day is usually a granola bar between courses. But I adapted. Found study groups that met while I was awake. Developed ties with teachers during office hours, when most students were socializing. Discovered that medical school admissions committees favored individuals who had worked their way through college. It showed determination and work ethic that trust fund children couldn't match. Adrian's dispatches from New York were more intermittent and ambiguous. The Juilliard summer program went well, but the year-long conservatory was reportedly more difficult than he had anticipated. His Instagram posts ranged from artistic revelations to concerns about the competitive environment of New York theater, the cost of living, and the challenge of standing out amid so many excellent performers. Roland kept making excuses on our periodic family phone calls. He's finding his artistic voice. The New York scene is tough to break into. He just needs more time to establish himself in the industry. Adrian truly needed a job, but it seemed beneath him. When I spoke with him personally, he complained about auditions that did not result in callbacks, pricey classes that did not produce the expected results, and the general difficulty of making it as an artist in New York. By my sophomore year, I discovered my rhythm. Better time management resulted in better marks. I raised my GPA to 3.7. The diner work was still hard, but I had been promoted to shift supervisor, which meant somewhat higher pay and more consistent hours. I'd also started coaching other students in organic chemistry, which was more lucrative than restaurant labor and looked well on medical school applications. Adrian, meantime, had relocated from his luxury Manhattan apartment to a shared space in Brooklyn. The updates from New York grew less regular, and when he did post on social media, he frequently talked about the difficulties of being an artist rather than his triumphs. Junior year provided both opportunity and problems. I'd begun volunteering at the campus health center, gaining hands-on experience with patient care that would prove invaluable for medical school applications. Dr. Laurent, the volunteer coordinator, became an informal mentor, guiding me through the medical school admission process and even writing one of my recommendation letters. But junior year also brought the news that Adrian was returning home. After 3 years and the loss of the majority of my college savings, the New York experiment was officially over. He was 23, broke, and settling back into his childhood bedroom as if nothing had occurred. Roland framed it as a chance to recuperate for his next phase, while also bringing key industry experience back to the local market. What it really meant was that Adrian had spent $85,000 of my inheritance and had nothing to show for it but stories about auditions he didn't get and connections that didn't go anywhere. The family relationships at holiday gatherings were unsettling. Adrian would regale everyone with stories from his experience in the industry, including actors and directors he'd met briefly at networking events. Meanwhile, I was working 16-hour days between classes, employment, and volunteering to prepare for the MCATs, while everyone else was engrossed with Adrian's stories from the Big Apple. Senior year was hectic. Medical school applications, MCAT prep, maintaining grades, and working enough hours to cover basic living expenses. I took the MCAT twice. The initial score was satisfactory, but not exceptional. After months of studying with borrowed prep books and free web tools, the second attempt turned out considerably better. Medical school interviews were their own form of torture. Professional clothing was out of my price range. Travel expenses cut into my grocery budget. The pressure of competing with applicants whose parents could afford test prep classes and application advisors. But somehow it worked. I was accepted to Oregon Health and Science University, my ideal school. Excellent reputation and reasonable cost for in-state students. Not a full scholarship, but manageable with loans and the part-time employment I intended to do while medical school. 4 years later, I graduated from Oregon State University with a 3.9 GPA in biochemistry. Not bad for someone who had been working 25 to 30 hours per week in college and subsisting on vending machine dinners and day-old diner pastries. Medical school was even more difficult without family support. While other students were able to focus solely on their academics, I was working weekends as a medical scribe at urgent care clinics, coaching undergraduates in organic chemistry, and conducting medical research for faculty members who paid graduate student rates for data analysis. These loans were terrible. Each semester came new promissory notes, debt totals, and projections for how long it would take to repay everything. By graduation, I owed approximately $250,000, which was modest for a doctor's wage, but still represented a mound of debt that would follow me for decades. Throughout medical school, I kept track of Adrian through social media and family gossip. He'd taken a job at a music store in town, was occasionally acting in local community theater shows, and was still living at home with Marianne and Roland, talking about his music career as if he was only in between major opportunities. The difference was startling. I was studying to diagnose heart attacks and deliver babies while working 80-hour weeks on clinical rotations, preparing to save lives and make a meaningful contribution to society. Adrian was selling guitar picks and auditioned for the Grease dinner theater play. I finished from medical school with honors and began my residency in family medicine at Portland General. 3 years of punishing schedules, overnight hours, emergency department rotations, and learning to manage everything from regular checks to life-threatening situations. But I loved it. Every challenging case, every complicated diagnosis, every patient I assisted, it all seemed worthwhile. During residency, family updates became increasingly troubling. Adrian had been laid off from the music store and was now working part-time at Guitar Center. Still living at home and chasing his dreams. He is approaching 30 and has no genuine professional prospects or life skills. Roland's health had deteriorated due to excessive stress, a bad diet, and what appeared to be untreated cardiac problems that he continued to ignore. Marianne was working part-time at a dental office but not earning enough to support 3 individuals, especially because Adrian contributed almost nothing to household expenses. I completed residency and began my own family medicine practice in a lovely Portland suburb, gradually growing a patient base and ultimately earning real money for the first time in my adult life. The practice exceeded all of my expectations. Assisting families, treating children, and elderly people. Being the type of doctor who genuinely listens and spends time with each patient. My student loans were finally affordable on a doctor's wage. I'd rented a little house with a garden, purchased a dependable car, and begun to consider genuinely starting a life rather than simply existing until the next exam or loan payment. Adrian, meanwhile, was 31 years old, still living in his boyhood bedroom, working part-time in retail, and occasionally posting on Facebook about impending projects that never materialized. Then the call arrived. On a calm Tuesday afternoon, I was in my office checking patient charts when Marianne called, crying profusely. Roland had been experiencing chest pains for several weeks but disregarded them because he didn't have time to be sick. The typical masculine response to worrying symptoms. He eventually collapsed at the Jiffy Lube during the morning shift and was sent to the hospital. According to the emergency department physician who contacted Marianne with updates, she had suffered a massive heart attack. "The doctors are saying he needs surgery," she wailed into the phone, "multiple bypasses, and they want to keep him in intensive care for at least a week." My medical training kicked in instantly. I inquired about his symptoms, timing, and what the cardiologist said about prognosis and therapy options. I began mentally calculating recovery time, probable complications, and the level of follow-up care he would require. "How much is this going to cost?" I said, already knowing the answer would be awful. That's when the true trouble emerged. Roland's health insurance through the Jiffy Lube business provided only catastrophic coverage, a large deductible, a narrow network, and the type of plan that works well for everyday treatment but bankrupts you when anything severe happens. They were looking at around $200,000 in hospital expenditures, assuming everything went well with no issues or lengthy recuperation time. Roland's plan would probably cover about 40% of that when the deductible was met. Marianne was worrying in the way that happens when someone who has never experienced major financial stress suddenly finds herself facing the possibility of losing everything. They didn't have any savings. Roland spent the most of his salary supporting Adrian's lifestyle and paying for his numerous professional development expenses. Roland had taken out a reverse mortgage on the house a few years before to support an unsuccessful business expansion. They were essentially screwed. "We don't know what to do," Marianne admitted, her voice breaking. "We thought maybe, since you're a doctor now." There it was. I'd been expecting it for years. "You want me to help with the medical bills?" "It's not that we expect you to pay everything," she responded quickly, presumably realizing how harsh that sounded. "But maybe you could talk to the doctors, work something out, help us figure out payment plans or charity care options." Helped them make up payment arrangements with the money I earned while working my ass off in medical school, while they used my inheritance to fund Adrian's Manhattan experience. I'll think about it, I assured her, the most non-committal statement I could muster. That evening, I sat in my living room, the first place I'd ever lived where I could afford to decorate tastefully, and really thought about what to do. A part of me wanted to help. Despite everything, Roland was not a bad person. He was simply a father who had made extremely poor decisions about how to support his son. Marianne had been weak rather than evil, allowing Roland to persuade her that pouring money at Adrian's dreams was more essential than protecting my future. But every time I felt sorry about their position, I recalled being in that 24-hour diner at 2 a.m. During medical school, I studied anatomy while selling coffee to inebriated college students because I couldn't afford to study full-time like my colleagues, who were supported by their parents. I recall eating ramen noodles for dinner 3 times a week because that was all I could afford after paying for textbooks and lab fees. I remembered the continual stress of loan applications, scholarship essays, and the exhaustion of working and studying at the same time, all while Adrian posted Instagram stories from fancy Manhattan restaurants. The following morning, I drove to my childhood home for the first time in 3 years. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, except for Adrian's car in the driveway, a respectable Honda Accord that probably cost more than I'd spent on food during my whole medical school career. The grass needed mowing, and the paint was flaking a little, but it was still the middle-class suburban home where I grew up. I knocked on the door and waited. Adrian responded, as if he had just awoken, despite the fact that it was 11 a.m. He still had that entitled expression, albeit it faltered somewhat as he noticed me standing there. "Oh, hey Clara. Marianne's at the hospital with Roland." "I know. I came to see you." He let me in, and I took a glance around the living room, where I had spent my childhood. The furniture is the same, and the walls are covered in family memorabilia, including several framed pictures of Adrian from various stage shows throughout the years. I saw that my academic achievements were not reflected anywhere. "This is really scary, you know," Adrian replied, snuggling into the couch as if he were about to have a long chat. "Roland's like really sick, and the money situation is totally screwed." "Yeah, I heard. What are you doing to help?" He seems perplexed by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what are you doing to help with the medical bills? You're 31 years old, you live here rent-free. They've supported your career attempts for over a decade. What's your plan for helping them through this crisis?" Adrian shuffled uneasily, obviously not used to being asked to accept responsibility for anything. "I mean, I'm working at Guitar Center. I don't exactly have medical bill money lying around, right? But you could get a second job, or maybe a better primary job that actually uses that expensive training they paid for you to get. It's not that simple. I'm still pursuing my music career. I can't just abandon everything I've worked for. Everything you'd worked for with my college fund." The audacity was amazing. "Adrian, what happened to the $85,000? "What do you mean?" "My college fund. The $85,000 from my father that was supposed to pay for my education. Where did it go?" He had the decency to appear uncomfortable. "At least that was like years ago, Clara. It went to my training, living expenses in New York, networking opportunities, investment in my future, right? And what return did they get on that investment?" The hush stretched between us. Adrian picked at a thread on the couch cushion, becoming increasingly intrigued in the upholstery pattern. "Look," his final response was, "I know you're probably still mad about the college thing, but that worked out fine. You're a doctor now, you made it work. I made it work by accumulating $250,000 in student debt and working 3 jobs throughout medical school. You made it work by spending my dead father's money on acting classes and Manhattan rent. That's not fair. Marianne and Roland made that decision as parents. I didn't force them to do anything." "No, but you sure didn't object to it either. And you didn't exactly rush to pay it back when your Broadway dreams didn't pan out." Adrian rose up and paced toward the window as people do when confronted with hard truths. "What do you want me to say, Clara? I'm sorry." "Fine. I'm sorry it worked out that way, but I can't change the past. And Roland's sick now. This is bigger than old family drama." "You're right. This is bigger than old family drama. This is about accountability." I dug into my purse and took out a CD, not a burned CD with a handwritten label. This was professionally created, with glossy artwork and all. Adrian's eyes widened as he noticed it. "Where did you get that?" "Your MySpace page from 2017, remember? You spent about $3,000 of my college fund getting these demo CDs professionally made, posted about it constantly, how this was going to be your breakthrough, how record labels would hear your talent and offer contracts. Adrian's cheeks turned red. That was a different phase of my career. I'm more focused on live performance now. Right. Well, I bought a copy off eBay. Figured it was the least I could do since I technically helped pay for it. I set the CD on the coffee table between us and went to the door. Adrian followed me. Clara, wait. What are you doing? Are you going to help with Roland's bills or not? I turned around at the door, gazing at this 31-year-old man who still lived in his childhood bedroom, had squandered my fortune on a failing goal, and was now pleading with me to help the family who had sacrificed my future for his own. I'm going to help exactly as much as this family helped me get through medical school. What does that mean? It means you should probably start checking couch cushions for spare change. Maybe sell some of those professional headshots from your portfolio. That evening, Marianne called again. Roland's surgery went well, but he would be in the hospital for at least a week. The bills were already piling up and they'd received an estimate for the whole treatment cost, $170,000, not counting follow-up care and rehabilitation. Did you talk to Adrian? She inquired. I did. Interesting conversation. He's still living the dream, apparently. Clara, please. I know you're angry about the college fund situation, but this is life or death. Roland could die if he doesn't get proper follow-up care. Marianne, Roland is going to get proper follow-up care. That's how hospitals work in America. They don't just let heart surgery patients die because of billing disputes. But the debt will destroy us. We'll lose the house. We don't know what to do. I took a long breath, attempting to strike the appropriate balance between honesty and brutality. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to talk to the hospital's financial counselor about payment plans. Every hospital has them. You're going to apply for charity care programs. Most hospitals have sliding scale assistance for people who can't afford treatment. Adrian is going to get a second job, or maybe his first real job, and contribute to household expenses so you can focus on paying medical bills. But Adrian's career is working retail part-time and occasionally performing in community theater. He's 31 years old. It's time to be realistic about his prospects and his responsibilities to this family. You could just help us. You're a doctor. You make good money now. There it was. The entitlement that had shaped my entire childhood. The belief that my success was somehow shared property, whereas Adrian's misfortunes were only transitory setbacks necessitating additional investment. You're right. I do make good money. I make good money because I worked my ass off to get through medical school without family support. I make good money because I spent 4 years eating ramen noodles and working nights, while my classmates went to study groups funded by parents who could afford to support their children's education. I make good money because I graduated with a mountain of debt that I'm still paying off. We did what we thought was best at the time. You did what was convenient for your new husband and his son. You sacrificed my future to fund Adrian's fantasy. And now you want me to rescue you from the consequences of that decision. It wasn't a fantasy. Adrian is talented. Marianne. Adrian is a 31-year-old man living in his childhood bedroom, working part-time at Guitar Center, whose biggest accomplishment in a decade is a demo CD that no record label ever bothered to listen to. Meanwhile, I'm actually helping people, saving lives, contributing to society in meaningful ways. Which one of us turned out to be the better investment? She was silent for a long time. So, you won't help? I'm not giving you money, if that's what you're asking. But I'll give you something better. I'll give you the same thing you gave me when I needed support for my education. Advice to figure it out on your own. And good luck making it work. That's cruel. No, Marianne. Cruel is taking a teenager's college fund, money specifically left by her deceased father for her education, and giving it to your stepson for acting classes. What I'm doing is justice. I hung up and blocked their number. The following few months were unexpectedly calm. I concentrated on my practice, which was rapidly expanding as word traveled about the new family doctor who genuinely listened to patients and took time for I'd begun specializing in preventative care and chronic illness appointments. Management, finding great satisfaction in assisting patients in maintaining their health rather than just addressing catastrophes. 2 weeks later, my cousin Elise called. She had heard about Roland's dilemma and my refusal to aid through the family grapevine and wanted to hear my side of the story. Because what I'm hearing from Marianne doesn't sound like the Clara I know, she explained delicately. I recounted everything: the college fund theft, Adrian's failing career sponsored by my inheritance, the years of favoritism and dismissive treatment, and their current expectation that I'd protect them from the repercussions of their own actions. Elise was quiet for a bit after I finished. Jesus, Clara, I had no idea about the college fund thing. That's incredibly messed up. Yeah, well, water under the bridge now. Is it though? I mean, how do you feel about how this is all playing out? I thought about the question thoroughly. You know what? I'm actually at peace with it. I spent years being angry about what they did to me. But building my career, proving I could succeed without their support, that's been incredibly satisfying. Now they need help, and they're finding out what it feels like when family doesn't come through for the important stuff. What about Roland though? I mean, he could actually have complications, need ongoing care. Roland isn't going to die, Elise. They'll work out payment plans with the hospital, maybe qualify for charity care programs. Figure something out the way millions of Americans do every year. Hospitals have entire departments dedicated to helping people navigate these situations, but they'll have to do it themselves. And maybe they'll learn what it's like to struggle financially for something important, like I did for 8 years. Elise understood. She'd seen the family dynamics throughout the years during holiday parties and noticed how differently Adrian and I were treated, but she'd never realized the magnitude of it. A month later, I learned through the family network that Roland had been discharged and was doing well at home. They had qualified for the hospital's charity care program, which covered roughly 60% of the costs. The remaining bills were set up on a 10-year payment plan with lower interest rates. More importantly, Adrian had secured a second job working evenings at a call center. He continued to live at home but was now contributing to household expenses for the first time in his adult life. Apparently, the financial crisis served as a wake-up call concerning the realistic prospects for his music career. Marianne had returned to work full-time as a dental receptionist, her first full-time position in years. They were getting by, but there wasn't enough money for Adrian's artistic ambitions or professional advancement. Adrian contacted me personally 6 months after Roland's surgery, rather than through Marianne or other family members, by text message. Hey Clara, I know things have been weird between us, but I wanted to reach out. Roland's recovery is going really well, and I've been thinking a lot about what you said about accountability and responsibility. I got a better job, assistant manager at a music store downtown. Not just retail sales, still doing music stuff on weekends, but treating it more like a hobby now instead of expecting it to pay the bills. Anyway, I wanted to say I'm sorry about the college fund. It was the first sincere apology I had ever received from him. Not flawless, not thorough, but honest and detailed, as opposed to the customary non-apology apologies I had received from my family. I replied with the following. Thanks for saying that, Adrian. I'm glad Roland's doing better and that you're taking more responsibility. That means a lot. That was it. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no return to family dinners, but rather a sense of tranquility that felt more valuable than forced forgiveness. Another 6 months have passed. My practice continues to grow. I'd recruited a nurse practitioner to help with the patient load and had finally paid off my undergraduate school loans. Still had medical school debt, but it was manageable and steadily diminishing. I was at my office late one evening, finishing up patient files and insurance paperwork, when I received a call from an unknown local number. Dr. Reinhardt, this is Roland. My stepfather's voice was different, lower and uncertain than I remembered from childhood. Hi Roland, how are you feeling? Much better. The cardiologist says I'm ahead of schedule on recovery. Listen, I was wondering if I could take you to coffee sometime. There are some things I'd like to say, and I don't think I can do them justice over the phone. We met the following Saturday in a neutral spot, a coffee shop near my office that I occasionally stop by between appointments. Roland appeared older, more fatigued than I remembered, and healthier than I had expected considering the significant operation. I owe you an apology, he began without explanation. Several apologies, actually. I waited, curious about where this was headed. The college fund thing was wrong, not just misguided or poorly thought out, it was wrong. I convinced Marianne it was the right decision for the family, but it wasn't. That money was meant for your education, specifically set aside by your father for that purpose, and we had no right to redirect it. Why did you do it? Roland swirled his coffee for a long time, apparently contemplating how to respond honestly. Honestly, because I was desperate to prove that supporting Adrian's dreams was the right choice. I'd been divorced, felt like I'd failed at being a father the first time around, and I wanted to show Adrian that I believed in him completely. But I did it at your expense, and that was inexcusable. What about Adrian? Have you talked to him about all this? We've had several long conversations over the past few months. The financial crisis was a wake-up call for him about taking responsibility for his own life instead of expecting other people to fund his dreams. He's been contributing to household expenses, found better employment, started acting like the adult he should have been years ago. I'm glad he's growing up. Roland, I need you to know Marianne never stopped feeling guilty about the college fund decision. She talks about it constantly now. How proud she is that you made it through medical school and built a successful practice despite our lack of support. How much she regrets listening to me about redirecting that money to Adrian. Then why didn't she ever say that to me directly? Pride, I think, and maybe fear that you'd reject the apology or tell us it was too little, too late. Roland reached into his jacket and took out a folded piece of paper. This is a promissory note. We can't pay you back the full $85,000 all at once, but we've worked out a budget to repay you over 10 years with interest. It's not enough compensation and it's not soon enough, but it's what we can realistically manage given our current financial situation. I unfurled the document and examined it. It was extensive and well thought out, including monthly payment amounts, interest computations, and contingency plans in case their financial status altered. The interest rate was significantly more than what they had to give. You don't have to do this, Roland. Yes, we do. We stole your inheritance and used it to fund a fantasy. Now we're going to pay it back, even if it takes until we're both dead to do it. I folded the paper and stored it in my purse. Roland, I want you to know I'm not angry anymore. I was for a long time, furious about what felt like a betrayal, but building my career on my own terms, proving I could succeed without family support, that actually healed something in me. I'm grateful for the struggle in some ways because it made me stronger and more self-reliant. That doesn't make what we did right. No, but it makes me who I am today. And I like who I've become. We drank our coffee and talked about more appropriate topics. Roland's rehabilitation, my practice, and the weather. Normal chat between two grown-ups who have discovered a way to cohabit together.